Greetings and good morning, fellow nerds, dorks, geeks, all the things. Welcome back to J Vegas Nerds Creations and Designs. I am once again still Dan Blackwell, if you're not familiar with who I am or what I like to talk about on this channel. First thing I'd like to address, because I promised I would, is 3D printing and some of the trials and tribulations and things that you end up going through, right? So my son is also getting into it, and he found this set of armor, I believe for the Batman Beyond character, and as you can see, I had a catastrophic failure. It essentially slid off the printer bed because apparently I did not have adequate bed adhesion, and not only did this fail, and it's a significant loss of filament, but as you can clearly see, because I failed to do my due diligence and go back in there after the slicing before I saved it and see what kind of support I had, or in this case excessive support. If you're not familiar with what I'm saying, I will try to put a link in the description to a video from a cosplayer called Vault Fox, where she talks about how in Cura she can delete some of this excess support material, because when the model is being built itself, it supports itself and it's not going to risk sagging. If you're relatively new and unfamiliar with 3D printing, 3D printing likes to generate support in the event that there's some sort of an overhang, so that the material has something to adhere to. In this case, because the helmet was going to have a domed shape, it was generating all this support. Well, much of this is unnecessary, because as it slowly builds up, it's going to support itself naturally, where you don't need all of this excess material, because you're also just wasting filament. So I'm going to see if I can re-slice this. And another person I watch, who I've gotten a tremendous amount of information from, is Frank over at Frankly Built. I'll try to include a description to a link to his most recent video if you're unfamiliar, because he talks about specifically when part of the process of learning how to 3D print is trying to learn your printers. And I have my stuff set up in this shop here, which is, it's basically a purposely built shop. I have a garage door, but if you knew the layout of my house, it's not a garage. I mean, for crying out loud, I got a support beam right here that would prevent any vehicle itself from being parked in here. But nevertheless, this was a purpose-built shop back when the house was built for the gentleman who built it. As is such, I don't have what would classify as adequate HVAC. I mean, it's chilly in here. It's warm enough not to see my breath, but there's a chill in here. So he talks about the environment your printers are staged in or stored in, to include your filament and so on and so forth, whether it's humidity, you name it. And then he also talks about the necessity of using a glue stick in the event that the printer you're using, the size of your print, sometimes the glue stick may be necessary. I did not take that into account or consider it, so I did not use the glue stick when I was using my Elegoo Neptune 3 Plus. This item here may have been a bit much for the Elegoo Neptune 3 Plus, and it's got a little bit of weight to it, so there's a chance the weight itself was a bit much, and it caused it to come what's the word I'm looking for? It caused it to come loose from the printer bed. So, a little food for thought there. Now, I'm going to apologize in advance. This video might be a little long-winded, but it's for good reason. I'm on one of the things I'm on Facebook is a Mandalorian cosplay page. There you go. This is the way, right? And somebody had posted a very meta-style comment, in which case, a few things I want to say on that. A lot of people indulged in the meta concept, using both the Star Wars science fiction, science fantasy world, and using our own real world as an example, which is where a lot of the inspiration comes from for Star Wars anyways. And then a handful, I didn't actually count the individuals, but a handful had a problem. Like, they're like, oh my god, it's just a story, let it go. And I'm kind of torn, because I'm like, well, did the original person creating the post need to preface the statement, be advised, meta content, getting ultra meta, be forewarned? Or was the question itself automatically understood, this individual is getting rather meta? And that's kind of where I want to stick today, because I'm kind of curious, at least for those of you that may be fans of Star Wars. I'm going to paraphrase everything here to kind of keep it simple. Essentially, the question was, based on source information portraying, discussing, showing the Old Republic, which was apparently 1,000 years prior to Episode 1, that they had basically the exact same level of technology 1,000 years ago that is portrayed in Episode 1. As in, if that was 1,000 years ago, then in Episode 1 there should be 1,000 years worth of technological advancements. Fair enough question. That's a fair enough question. And it spurred quite a bit of conversation. Some very meta conversation, drawing some inspiration from our own actual real life world. So I would like to throw my 2 cents into the ring here, if you don't mind. So if we draw both inspiration from the Star Wars sci-fi, sci-fantasy concept, which is also somewhat grounded in real world examples, I mean, for me personally, and I don't know how many would disagree or agree, I feel like George Lucas used the Nazi Empire, the Nazi regime, as his source inspiration for the Galactic Empire. The Emperor himself being Hitler, Darth Vader being some amalgamation of Himmler, oh god, why am I drawing such a blank? Clausewitz, oh come on, help me out here. Not Goebbels. Goebbels was propaganda, but you get my gist, where Darth Vader was some sort of an amalgamation of the Enforcer. And then, of course, the Stormtroopers, just like Nazi Stormtroopers. So you could definitely see some, inspiration there, if you will. So much so that when he does the Indiana Jones series, it's wrought with Nazis and whatnot. So, moving forward. Pertaining to the question of technological advancements and whatnot, if you look inward at our own global society of human beings, what are some of the things that could stifle progress? What are some of the things that could stifle, say, technological advancements? Well, first and foremost, I think governments, as to include politicians, I think high powerful billionaire type businessmen who have something to lose as long as they can maintain the cornerstone of the market on a particular piece of technology, and religion. These could be 3 major players in the potential for progress or lack thereof. And some of the arguments that were being made, I don't know if people were paying attention, but they were talking specifically about progress in areas that nobody was quite planning for. And, it's funny how if you actually watch and pay attention, how some people didn't grasp the technology fast enough and how it did them in. So I'm going to try to simplify this as best as I can. If you look at automobiles, the truth of the matter is, right now, to the best of our knowledge, unless somebody's a scientific genius out there, chemistry major, and really wants to go way off the deep end, I'm perfectly fine with that, by the way. Petroleum-based products like gasoline currently offer the best bang for your buck, and that's not a pun intended. It's just, for the internal combustion engine, which is able to produce the most power at this point, and the most, how do I phrase this? It's a lot easier to fill up a tank with a combustible liquid than it is to charge an electric vehicle. And I'm not trying to, necessarily pick on or denigrate or speak poorly of electronic vehicles, but I mean, in a matter of minutes, you can fill an empty tank with petroleum, gasoline, whatever, diesel, E85, and be on your merry way. Where if you're out of a charge, it could take several hours, half of a day to a full day, to completely charge a battery. So as of right now, petroleum-based products get us the most bang for the buck. However, we've had petroleum-powered engines for the better part of a century, all right, if not an entire century and some change, all right, going back to Gottlieb Daimler and the invention of the carburetor. So with that being said, gasoline produces the best bang for the buck. You get greater explosive power out of gasoline based on its different levels of octane than you do E85. Even then, E85, which does burn cleaner, leaves hardly any carbon scarring on the internal components of the internal combustion engine. There's a price to pay for E85 as well. It's essentially ethanol. It's 85% ethanol. But that putting aside, both instances require the same internal combustion engine, which is designed to basically burn liquid fuel. Decades ago, somebody invented the vaporizing carburetor, which basically turns gasoline into a vapor and allows it to function the exact same way, which basically spreads out your miles per gallon, like, you know, triples, quintuples, whatever, your miles per gallon. But big business, you know, big industry, more than likely stifles that level of progress for their own personal gain. And I think you can apply that directly to the Star Wars lexicon. If we look at it from a different perspective in the Star Wars lexicon, if you are the owner of manufacturing, whether it's weapons, whether it's machinery, engines, what have you, and you employ thousands to upon millions of people, which science has proven your average person desires purpose. Get up, go to work, earn a living, pay my bills, take care of my family. You know, very narrow scope, not overly concerned about the big picture, not overly concerned about the greed and the wealth and the higher agendas of the people I work for. Just, I have my purpose, I have my task, I'm good. Apply that to Star Wars, right? So these rich people who are part of developing the technologies for the Empire, right? Well, obviously they don't want any newcomers. They don't want any unwelcome people to their party, their social circle, right? So they want to contain it within, all right? So that could also stifle the progress of technology. Secondly, the Empire also seeks to assist them in, hey, you do this for us, we'll keep you employed, you keep your people employed, pacify your people. It's a win-win situation. In which case, if anything seeks to dislodge that momentum, if anything seeks to dislodge that agreed upon standard, then yeah, there would seek to be a resistance towards it. So that would include technology. If there was a better way to produce things, if there was a better way to do things, which would, you know, seek to undermine the authority and the power and the wealth of those in charge, then yeah, they would definitely want to stifle that. Just like in just like in our own world, stifling the ability to somehow lengthen the miles per gallon by coming up with a new and more efficient way to burn petroleum products inside of the internal combustion engine. Why haven't we converted to propane? Why haven't we converted to methane? Apparently there's a significant amount of methane trapped within the earth that we could harness and somehow convert that. But because the automobile companies, in conjunction with OPEC, have decided, no, we've got too much of a good thing going here, let's not do that just yet. And, you know, that technology may have been available decades ago, but, you know, the powers that be in charge, you know, who also basically pay through lobbyists to, you know, put politicians in office to vote a certain way, that in and of itself could stifle progress. In the comments section of that post, a lot of people were talking about the Soviet Union and whatnot. I don't really want to get into that so much, as I was just trying to sort of hyper expose where your religions, your governments, and your power brokers in business can often have a large part to play. You know, you look at our space race, right? I mean, we've basically all we've managed to do is put more and more satellites in space. We haven't been to the moon since the 1960s, and that was 60 years ago. This decade, the third decade of the 21st century, is 60 years since we've been on the moon. What else? We've only sent probes and rovers to Mars within that 60 years. You could say that we've made some significant advancements in the areas of science and medicine, but you know, compared to where we were decades ago, I don't know if it matches per se. In which case, you know, there have been regulating bodies that have sometimes interfered, sometimes with good purpose and good reason, because sometimes science can exceed the morality of what is socially acceptable. Not sure how that would play into this the Star Wars lexicon, but I mean, I'm just giving you some, you know, real world examples that could potentially apply. Because at the end of the day, let's face it, Star Wars is essentially written by terrestrial brown people here using their own imagination. It's also possible that within the scope of the story, the people telling the story, whether it was George Lucas, people he approved to carry the story on, the Old Republic, they may not have thought that far in advance, like, oh, we need to also downgrade the technology to match 1,000 years prior to this, that, or the other. They may not have thought that far ahead. Maybe they did, and they were thinking about some of the stuff I just said, where perhaps governments, religions, power brokers stifled technological progress. I mean, with certain medical advancements, and when I say medical, I also mean like genetic engineering and whatnot. With certain scientific advancements, which are usually done in labs, practical applications, I don't know if they've been so widespread in the form of progress. I know one of the examples given in the post was cell phones and tablets and the internet. Yeah, that's significant. The internet all by itself is pretty significant as far as a technological advancement, both good, bad, or indifferent. And what the internet has done, I mean, the irony is not lost on me. I'm creating a video that I'm going to put on an internet-based service provider to project this video across the world for the 1 to 2 people that may watch it. But regardless, the internet is probably one of our most significant technological advancements. Cell phones are probably another significant technological advancement. Computers, what a lot of people may not realize is computers and computer technology does advance at a relatively rapid rate, but it depends on how you want to quantify that. Quite frankly, what I know, the very little I know about computers, and I probably know more than some, but a lot less than others, is a lot of the advancements that are made in computer technology here, terrestrially speaking, is not necessarily noticeable with the naked eye. Maybe for some of you it is, if the advancement is drastic. If you go from a graphics card that's 20 years old to a modern day graphics card, and you spend the appropriate amount of money for that modern day graphics card, you might see a significant difference. If you switch over from a spinning hard drive to a solid state drive, and your processor is still relatively stable, you may see a significant difference. If you swap out your processor and potentially even your motherboard for a more modernized motherboard processor combination, and swap out and upgrade your RAM, you may see a noticeable difference. I can tell you the most noticeable difference I've seen technologically speaking on computers is when I swapped over to solid state drives and I used a solid state drive to boot from. If you're unfamiliar and you're kind of curious, just hit me up. But then lastly, 3D printing. I mean, 3D printing is one of the biggest and most significant, technological advancements I think we've seen. But the question here that I'm kind of putting out there, and I'd like to get some feedback on if anybody wants to provide the feedback, is if we compare ourselves to Star Wars, or just talking about Star Wars, do you think the story and the technology match timelines, or do you think there's a significant discrepancy? Do you think the old Republic and Episode 1 and whatnot do not represent enough technological advancements or enough technological unimprovements to maintain some sense of continuity? Do you think here, terrestrially speaking, we're suffering some of the same things, where there's areas we should have been progressing in and we haven't, and yet there's other areas we could have never foreseen? I don't know that anybody foresaw the cell phone. I don't know that anybody foresaw the tablet. I don't know that anybody foresaw 3D printing, although maybe they did. But these are some areas that may have caught big business off guard. These are areas that may have caught the power brokers, religion, governments off guard, and there's very little they can do to stop that level of advancement. So I'm very curious. But keeping with the whole Star Wars theme, it goes back to, again, questions I've asked in the past. At the ultra meta level, is it too severe that you can't get over it and the continuity is destroyed, or is it still entertaining, whether in video game or book or graphic novel or comic? Is it still entertaining enough to allow you to escape into that science fictional fantasy world for a moment in time, to take you away from whatever it is you don't like about what's going on right now? And if the answer is yes, then so be it. If the answer is no, I need the continuity, I need this, then cool, you be you. By all means, leave your feedback. That's kind of what this whole geeky, nerdy platform is for. Leave your feedback. And if you do, I promise I will read your comments out loud. I will respond to your comments and try to keep this conversation going. Otherwise, keep it nerdy. We'll talk next time.